Mr. Speaker, I want to thank my friend and colleague, Congressman Allred, for his leadership in the fight to protect the fundamental right to vote and to save our ailing democracy. It has been an honor working with him, with Congresswoman Terry Sewell, and with Congressman John Sarbanes over the past year on both the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act and the Freedom to Vote Act. As you just heard, we are living through the worst assault on the right to vote since the Jim Crow era. And yesterday, on the Senate floor, white nationalists used the Jim Crow filibuster to block voting rights legislation. But they did not win the contest for the soul of our nation. I rise to affirm that we, the people, aren't giving up that easy. We never give up. We, the people, didn't give up when, after we finally ended the scourge of slavery in this nation, white nationalists fought back, violently unraveling Reconstruction, throwing duly elected black people out of office, and barring black voters from the voting booth for generations. We responded by organizing. Progress came in fits. It took us nearly a century, but progress came. It came in the courtroom, where Thurgood Marshall helped to end a century of legalized segregation. It came on the streets, where the March on Washington and the Montgomery bus boycott produced meaningful social change. And of course, it came in Congress, where after considerable pressure from the civil rights movement, this chamber and the Senate passed the Voting Rights Act into law, and they overcame a filibuster to do it. Imagine that. Mr. Speaker, like you, I was hoping against all hope that today's story would end the same way, with a majority of senators doing the right thing. To those of you watching at home, to the millions of you who put it all on the line to save our democracy, to see the Freedom to Vote John R. Lewis Act become law, I feel your pain right now. But I do not despair. As Sherilyn Ifill, the Director Counsel of the NAACP's Legal Defense Fund, said recently, no story in the history of our quest for racial justice has ever ended with the words, "and then they gave up." Our story, the story of building a true multiracial democracy in the 21st century, is no exception. The fact is, progress is not always linear. It is messy. There are false starts. There are setbacks like what happened last night. But the weight of history and the force of reason are on our side. I grew up in the Baptist church. To quote from the book of Jeremiah, like a fire shut up in my bones, I know that goodness will prevail. As the elders used to say, trouble don't last always. Weeping may endureth for a night, but joy cometh in the morning. Look at how far we have come already. Just a few years ago, democracy reform was a pipe dream, embraced only by the most committed activists. But thanks to an overwhelming groundswell of energy, of movement building, of organizing, the Freedom to Vote John R. Lewis Act passed the House, and it came just 2 votes short of passing the Senate. We are not going anywhere. We are more energized than ever to see this through. We must pick up Senate seats this fall to make the filibuster an impossibility. This is the fight of our lives, for our climate, for health care, our jobs, our dignity under the law, our future. We have no choice but to keep going. I am reminded of the words of Dr. King in his 1966 speech in Kingtree, South Carolina. Let us march on ballot boxes, for this is the way we're going to straighten up the nation. Let us march on ballot boxes until somehow we will be able to develop that day when men will have food and material necessities for their bodies, freedom and dignity for their spirits, and education and culture for their minds. Let us march on ballot boxes so that men and women will no longer walk the streets in search of jobs that do not exist. Let us march on ballot boxes until empty stomachs are filled. Let us march on ballot boxes until the idle industries of Appalachia are revitalized. Let us march on ballot boxes until brotherhood is more than a meaningless word at the end of a prayer, but rather the first order of business of every legislature's slate or agenda. Let us march on ballot boxes. Dr. King's words are as true today as they were nearly 60 years ago. But while our work must include the ballot box, we know that it also must go beyond it. We must envision the world as we want it, and we must do everything in our power to bring about that world. Hold your elected officials accountable. Educate your friends, your family, your neighbors. Change their hearts and minds. Mr. Speaker, unlike John Lewis and his generation, we are not called to risk our lives. We are merely called to exercise the rights that they helped us to win, our votes and our voices. Like those before us, let us march on.